Baltimore high schooler passes just 3 classes in 4 years, earning a .13 GPA, and yet he is ranked near the top of his class in terms of academic achievement. With regard to minority performance in public schools, the soft bigotry of low expectations has now become the hard racism of paternalistic white liberal do-goodedness. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start in Baltimore with the unbelievable story of a 17-year-old boy who otherwise would be ready for college, who now has found out he's only passed 3 classes in 4 years, as teachers kept promoting him and his classmates to the next level, even after failing him. This is so wrong on so many levels. Number one, this shows you a system that we've been warning you about for years, where teachers and schools get credit if they pass kids forward. They get paid more. A student that doesn't pass and get to the next grade, that's money you don't get in most states. The only way you get all the money that you're promised for all the kids you have is if each kid makes his way through. So kids who literally cannot read and write as freshmen are sent forward as sophomores and juniors and then to seniors. Here we have a situation where a theoretically graduating senior has a .13 GPA. He has passed only 3 classes in his entire career. And I want to take a look here now at what Mom says. Watch this story from Mom's perspective, because Mom's responses also show you the problem.
This coming June is when Tiffany France thought her son would receive his diploma.
And I'm just trying to fight. He like, Mom, what was all this for? What did I do this for? Like, don't he get a chance? Do he get a chance?
But after 4 years of high school, this mom just learned her 17-year-old has to start over. He's been moved back to 9th grade.
Why would he do 3 more years in school? He didn't fail, the school failed him.
His transcripts show in 4 years, he has passed just 3 classes, earning 2.5 credits, which places him in 9th grade. But France says she didn't know that until February. She has 3 children and works 3 jobs. She thought her oldest son was doing well because even though he failed most of his classes, he was being promoted. His transcripts show he failed Spanish 1 and Algebra 1, but was promoted to Spanish 2 and Algebra 2. He also failed English 2, but was passed on to English 3.
I just got done explaining to you why the school is to blame, and the school is the primary problem here. However, I realize she's got 3 jobs. She's trying really hard. But when you see the kid even in the shadows there, and I'm glad they don't mention the kid by name, but when you see him there, he's playing video games and he pulls a cell phone out of his pocket. I mean, the idea that the schools alone are responsible for this is ridiculous. That young man knew he had failed. That man knew what his performance was. And there was never any effort on the part of him or the family. If you think the public schools, and this is the mistake that the mom has, if you think the public schools are the primary people responsible for your education, your kids' education, you are wrong. You have to be as the mom and dad. And I'm not asking you to work a 4th job, Mom, to become a tutor for your kid. But are you asking your children what goes on in school? Are you asking to see their report cards? Are you, once in 4 years, did you go to a parent-teacher meeting? There's so much blame to go around. The city of Baltimore, which is spending all kinds of money on these kids, much more than places like Houston, for much less result. How much of that money is being funneled into radical race programs or into all sorts of goofy sexuality training, or just ends up in the pockets of teachers' unions? You're wasting all that money and getting nothing for it. From the top of the schools down, the state down, the schools and the mom. This is exactly why American public education is nothing but a fraud and a failure.
Well, and as the mom has said, I feel like the school system, never gave my son an opportunity. Like if there was an issue with him not advancing or not progressing, that they should have contacted me first 3 years ago. In the past 4 years, though, how much communication have you not had with your son to say, son, pull out your books, pull out your notebooks, pull out your folders. Does it have any test
Put away
grades
the
in
phone.
it? Put away
the video games.
You can, mom, easily grab his phone that apparently is working and call the school for him and ask, hey, how's my son doing? It doesn't take that much effort. And I
just see it, just
people
look at the report card.
Probably doesn't bring it home, but that's the argument always is why I am working 3 jobs, I'm doing the best I can. Yes. We're not saying, as you said, you don't have to get a 4th job and become a tutor. It just takes that much effort to give a call to the school and see what's going on. The other thing that's interesting to note is that, so he failed 22 classes and was late or absent 272 days in the first 3 years. 272 days. So you don't know where did you know he was absent?
No, she clearly did not.
I mean, that's the issue here.
And
it's not just, it's all of it. It's his responsibility. It's her responsibility. It's the school's responsibility.
You're a single mom. I get that. And as much as I applaud you for dealing with 3 kids and having 3 jobs, do you really need that 3rd job if your kid's got PlayStation and a nice TV on the wall and cell phone? Do you really need to work 3 to give your kids those luxuries?
Well, in Baltimore, it's just not one kid who's failing. It's pretty much all the kids who are failing, and it's the mayor who's giving excuses for what is actually happening. Of course, it's the almighty dollar.
Mayor Scott, we have schools, and we knew about this, but because of Project Baltimore, that are literally failure factories, pushing kids grade to grade when they shouldn't be, and creating, Mayor Scott, a whole underclass world in our city.
We know that we can no longer continue to educate our children the way that we have been, C4. I know, and it's not just about this, but we know that our system has been underfunded by $300 million by the state.
According to the U.S. Census of America's 100 largest school systems, Baltimore City is 5th in per pupil spending. At nearly $16,000 per student, Baltimore spends much more on education than cities with similar demographics, such as Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit. Baltimore spends $6,000 more per student than Houston. And according to the U.S. Department of Education, Houston scores 10 points better on English proficiencies than Baltimore, and 20 points better in math.
And excuse me, Mr. Mayor, excuse me. The idea, you said it, we can't go on educating kids the way we have been. Well, you haven't been educating, number one. Number two, do you really think this new curriculum, this Black Lives Matter 1619 nonsense, this racial awareness curriculum, which I'm sure you're going to take in Baltimore, I have no doubt about it. Do you really think that's going to change this? All that's going to do is make every kid in the school dumber and less accountable. We can go back to the way we used to teach kids. Go back before all of these progressive revolutions in education and make discipline the key, attendance mandatory, penalties for not showing up, truancy, and focus on math and reading and science. You can get it. It's not that complicated.
So while Baltimore is a hot mess, Boston is trying to pretty much put themselves into be a hot mess because now they're going to get rid of anything that is advanced because you know what? Racism. We can no longer have advanced classes in Boston because there are too many white kids and too many Asians doing too well. So of course, in the name of equality, Boston Public Schools is canceling the program. It's the advanced work classes program. It was meant for the 4th through the 6th graders. So you kind of recognize them. They take a test in 3rd grade. You recognize that maybe some of these kids are a little bit more advanced, so they want to excel them. Not anymore. No, we're going to cancel that.
Well, listen to the superintendent. This is Brenda Casilius, right? Quote, "There's been a lot of inequities that have been brought to the light in the pandemic that we have to address. There's a lot of work we have to do in the district to be anti-racist and have policies where all our students have a fair shot at an equitable and excellent education." Ma'am, with all due respect, this is dodging the question. You have some kids who just happen to be white and Asian who are much better prepared, much better able to move forward. And what you're saying is that because we failed to educate minority students the same way, we're going to punish the achieving kids for that. How dare you take school seriously? How dare you, Asian moms and dads, tutor your kids and make them turn off the TVs and the video games in the evening and work on math problems? How dare you, white families, find ways to supplement your kids' education? And what we're going to do, because you were vigilant and we couldn't get your own kids in minority neighborhoods up to snuff, up to basic literacy in our classes, we're going to punish you and then revisit this later. It does. In other words, your answer to the problem of minority unachievement is to punish achieving kids and blame it all on racism. You should have your license to teach, let alone be a superintendent suspended immediately.
But here's what's something that's kind of interesting. So basically, they're doing this and doing the canceling because they looked at some stats and they found that 70% of the students who were in this program were white or Asian. So 30% were Hispanic or black. Right. But overall, in the entire district, it was about 80%, nearly 80% of the students in the entire district were Hispanic or black. So, of course, the numbers didn't line up. But what happens is when these kids take this test, it's a lottery system still. So blame it on the lottery. Maybe there could have been more and obviously different ways to approach how these kids get into this program. And maybe it would be a little bit more fair or, as you say, just actually care and have your kids be doing work.
If there's a lottery, that means kids have to put their names in, right?
Oh, maybe
that's another thing, right? I mean, as we saw in the previous episode, the previous segment about Mrs. France and her young son who failed all but 3 classes. I mean, at some point there has to be engagement, and if you're really going to punish certain moms and dads for being involved in their kids' education, trying to make sure they're doing the right thing, you are sending not just the wrong message, you are sending an anti-education message. That's what your entire school system does. So it's what the school district, it's what the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland was doing. It is exactly, in the previous story, it's exactly what you're doing too in Boston. You're whining about low minority performance, but you are doing nothing to fix that performance other than castigating those who can do. And it seems to me that you feel that the proper solution to this is to do away with altogether gifted and talented programs so that everybody what? If everybody is equally lazy or stupid or left out, that means you've got a successful school? That seems to be what you're suggesting.
I was in the gifted and talented program. If they would have taken that away from me, I would not have learned a lot of riddles, because that's what I remember doing. Exercising my mind, everybody. So we have a little bit of a fight, a tiff, if you will, going between some publications about what the teaching of Islam in public schools means. And so according to PJ Media, the Christian Science Monitor has become an apologist for Islam teachings in our schools. And according to Christian Science Monitor, they recently published a story called Schools Teach About Islam and Are Accused of Indoctrination. Now, the article itself then stated that when a 7th grade social studies class at Dodd Middle School in Cheshire, Connecticut, taught Islam, and they were critiqued and then sued by a parent for doing so, it was the students who lost out because they weren't going to learn about Islam.
This is what drives me nuts about stories like this. You see this in every walk of American life now. You're not allowed to teach anything Christian in the schools or Jewish. Anything that even reeks of Christian theology or Jewish theology, it is immediately segregated from the schools. Yet, when it comes to Islam and Islam alone, there's no attempt by teachers or pedagogy to distinguish the history of Islam from the religion. Notice what Western intellectuals do. They insist Christianity is an aberration. It's a childish patriarchal aberration. And when we teach the Middle Ages, we're going to downplay that. When Judaism, the central role of Judaism in the rise of Jewish culture, well, that's an aberration too, right? We can separate the Jewish person from the religion, only teach certain aspects of Jewish culture, not the faith. But when it comes to Islam, they're inseparable, right? The faith is the culture is the faith. So that's why you have all of these situations across the country where American kids are being forced to reply in religious ways to Islamic dogma. How many times have we heard young children in American schools being forced to recite or hand write out, there is only one God and Allah is his name, right? And Muhammad is his prophet. That's crossing a line. Can you imagine if you did something similar on the other side? There is only one God, and Yahweh is his name. There's only one God, and Christ is his name. You would never get away with that. And now the progressive left is going after moms and dads who conscientiously point out this illegal double standard, going to court and winning in court. Because you can't teach kids that at the expense of other religions, which is exactly what they're doing. So the progressive left now has decided that anybody who attacks the pro-Islamic religion curriculum in American public schools is now a racist anti-Muslim, which is absurd.
Well, and according to these articles, these competing publications, PJ Media sounds like they're yelling at Christian Science Monitor because they're saying the Christian Science Monitor is actually the ones who's in favor here of all of this indoctrination of being all in favor and for the teaching of Islam. But is there an article of the Christian Science Monitor defending Christianity being taught, or is there not? So that's what's so.
The Christian Science Monitor has gone out of its way to argue that anybody objecting to this pro-Islamic theological curriculum is a bigot, while not defending or even suggesting we should have similar accommodations made for Christianity. And this is the so-called Christian Science Monitor, right? They do not make an argument for similar accommodations for Judaism and Christianity. That's what the problem is here. PJ Media is exactly right. When you have quasi-Christian organizations like this calling out Christians for being bothered by the serious teaching of theological truths of another religion at the expense of anybody else's, it goes to show just how far our so-called Christian institutions are failing the culture as well.
It's time now for some real education, and this week it's a focus on Billy Shakespeare and what some of the world's heavy hitters had to say about the one, the only William. And today we're going to take a look at John Milton.
Yeah, I would like to remind you all is not Shakespeare Week because, again, Shakespeare is one of those artists who is on the cancel block along with Dr. Seuss and many others, and the Muppets, for God's sake. But what we're trying to do here is we did Dr. Seuss Week all last week as a way to try to show moms and dads what will be missed now with this new purge. Same thing with Shakespeare. But rather than read quotes from Shakespeare, which would be very illuminating, let's just look for this week at those other great minds down through history who read Shakespeare and benefited immensely from them, and maybe try to pull back this crazy culture. Take a look at John Milton. Milton was a 17th century poet, about 100 years after Shakespeare, 80 years after Shakespeare. He was deeply indebted to the writing of Shakespeare. He wrote the great Christian Protestant epic, Paradise Lost, one of the most brilliant men in Western culture. And so he wrote a poem, a sonnet, dedicated to the memory of Shakespeare and his work. Let's read that now. Milton refers to Shakespeare, our sweetest Shakespeare, fancy's child. I love that. A child of imagination. The word fancy in the 17th century referred to imagination. Shakespeare, Milton says, was the child of imagination. Our sweetest Shakespeare, fancy's child, warble his native wood notes wild. What needs my Shakespeare for his honored bones? The labor of an age in piled stones. I mean, he's so great an artist. We saw this with Ben Jonson yesterday, that he defies mortality. He defies death. As long as his poems and his book exists, his words will exist. What needs my Shakespeare for his honored bones? The labor of an age in piled stones. Huge pyramids built to his honor, or that his hallowed relic should be hid under starry pointing pyramids. No. This is one of those rare intellectual geniuses whose work alone will stand, and every cajoling, left-wing, undereducated high school teacher in this country who thinks she in particular, is doing something particularly memorable in replacing Shakespeare in the readings of their high school English classes and changing them out for second and third rate authors because they happen to be of a different race or a gender, you can go ahead and get rid of Shakespeare from the minds of high school kids, but you will not remove his influence in the culture. All you're doing is ensuring that your kids are going to be culturally bankrupt when they graduate. Finish the poem. Milton calls Shakespeare the dear son of memory, because memory and imagination are two critical things in the creation of art, in the creation of learning for that matter. Not only is he a child of fancy, Shakespeare, the imagination, he is the son of memory, that great heir of fame. Why needst thou such weak witness of thy name? You don't need the half-wit teachers of corrupt American public schools to push your fame and your genius. It's going to exist even if a generation of kids grows up ignorant and stupid. And so, Milton continues, and so sepulchred in such pomp thou dost lie, that kings for such a tomb would wish to die. You have better than a pyramid or some incredibly expensive monument. You live in the imaginations and the minds, the memory of those who appreciate art and truth. And no public school system with its cancel culture imperatives is really going to do away with that.
All right, if you're a fan of the show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club, and we'll send you our signature tumbler as a little thank you note. Visit patriotclub.us to sign up. That's patriotclub.us. And just a quick reminder to please download our brand new Freedom Project Media app. By doing so, you're going to get access to 17 new shows every single week, plus our entire library of content. Simply search Freedom Project Media in your app store, and once you download it, then make sure you allow for notifications.
And that wraps up things for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.